Hello and welcome. My name is Alan and today we are doing more. A Testament of Hope, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Let's jump right into this. We have a new interview to read. This is an interview on the television news series Face to Face. The blurb reads, the International Platform Association sponsored this interview with Mayor Ivan Allen of Atlanta, Dick Gregory, the famous black comedian and civil rights activist, Dr. King, and Roy Wilkins of the NAACP in Washington, D.C. on the 28th of July, 1967. President Lyndon Baines Johnson had made a nationally televised announcement of his appointments to the Special Advisory Committee on Civil Disorders on the 27th of July. Johnson appointed Governor Otto Kerner of Illinois as its chairman and Mayor John Lindsay of New York as its vice chairman. President Johnson charged this Kerner Commission with the responsibility of investigating the tidal wave of racial disorders that disrupted cities during the summer of 1967, such as Atlanta, Chicago, New York, New Haven, Tampa, Winston-Salem, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Toledo, Newark, Boston, Plainsfield, Cairo, Minneapolis, Buffalo, East St. Louis, and Detroit. The Commission issued its report in January of 1968 and concluded that the United States was moving toward two separate societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal. It contended that racial and economic injustice were the chief causes of the riots. Dr. King was deeply grieved by the eruption of the racial violence, but he had been warning for years that the triple ghetto of race, poverty, and human misery in the U.S. cities was certain to produce a huge conflagration. It came in the summer of 1967. This interview was an attempt to assess the damage in the midst of the fire, for the disorders continued throughout most of the month of August. Mr. Byrd of West Virginia, Mr. President, the International Platform Association recently held its 65th annual convention at the Sheridan Park Hotel here in Washington, D.C. At that convention, there was a discussion between Dr. Martin Luther King, Mayor Ivan Allen, Mr. Roy Wilkins, and Mr. Dick Gregory on the subject of race riots. The discussion was moderated by Mr. Mark Evans, and Mr. Drew Pearson was a special guest. The discussion took place on WTTG5 Metro Media Television. I ask unanimous consent that the transcript of the entire discussion be inserted in the record. There being no objection, the transcript was ordered to be printed in the record as follows. A discussion between Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Mayor Ivan Allen, Mr. Roy Wilkins, Mr. Dick Gregory, moderated by Mark Evans, special guest, Dr. Drew Pearson. King, I am Martin Luther King Jr., President of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Allen, I am Ivan Allen Jr., Mayor of the City of Atlanta, Georgia. Wilkins, my name is Roy Wilkins, and I'm Executive Director of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Gregory, I am Dick Gregory, and I feel that I'm a passive revolutionist. Evans, my name is Mark Evans, the gentleman you have just met and you are about to meet face to face. Welcome to a special edition of Face to Face. The long, hot summer has been marked by race riots of such violence and unprecedented number that every citizen among us must consider the cause and the cure his personal concern. Thanks to the cooperation of the International Platform Association, meeting here in convention in the Sheridan Park Hotel in Washington, D.C., Face to Face is bringing you an exploration of this explosive problem. Drew Pearson, nationally syndicated columnist, is responsible for bringing to this platform the distinguished men you've just met. Now, let's meet Drew Pearson. Drew, would you like to give us a little bit of the background of the association? First, I understand you've been its president. You are now its program chairman. Just a word about its history and its purpose. Pearson. Well, the International Platform Association was founded approximately 75 years ago by my father, William Jennings Bryan, and other speakers of that era. Evans. I thought you said your father was Williams Jennings Bryan there for a few moments. Pearson. No, they were friends. Evans. Oh, I see. Pearson. This was in a day before the microphone, before television, when platform was the symbol of free discussion, and the members, it was a trade association, still is to some extent. The members believe in free discussion. They use the platform for speaking, for music, entertainment, and this is still the case. And we believe in discussion of all kinds. Evans. The audience here primarily is made up of professional lecturers, amateur lecturers, and those who appear on platforms all over the nation. Pearson. For the most part. Evans. Thank you very much, Mr. Drew Pearson. We're going to have some discussion now between some of these members of the panel, and each will make a brief summation of that which they have said in a short talk prior to our having gone on the air, and we'll have that right after I share this message with you. Evans. At a most appropriate time, this distinguished panel here appearing before a large gathering here at the Sheridan Park Hotel in Washington. All America and all the world is concerned about the riots that have taken place in our cities. As has been stated previously, these gentlemen have made some brief talks prior to our having gone on the air, and we're going to ask them in summation to point out the major points they wish to emphasize. And I'll turn first to Dr. King. King, the problems of our cities today are very great, and the problems of Negroes living in these cities are equally great and extensive. Some 92% of the Negroes of the United States find themselves living in cities, and they find themselves living in a triple ghetto in these cities on the whole. A ghetto of race, a ghetto of poverty, and a ghetto of human misery. And by the thousands and even millions, Negroes find themselves unemployed and underemployed. The young people find themselves attending segregated schools that are so often devoid of quality, and thousands of Negroes in these cities are forced to live in rat-infested, vermin-filled slums. All of these conditions have made for great despair, and so many of the people who find themselves caught up in the agony of their daily lives end up with the view that life is a long and desolate corridor with no exit sign. And these are the people who, in moments of desperation, find themselves engaging in riots that we have seen taking place in our country. And even though most of the people who are in these hopeless situations do not riot, it is now necessary for all to see that a destructive minority can poison the well springs from which the majority must drink. And so it is necessary for the nation as a whole to rise up now and find answers to the deep social problem. They must be answers that are real and honest, and they must be answers that will lead to positive and massive action programs that will spend the necessary money, the billions of dollars, to get rid of the blight of our cities, to get rid of the slums, to eradicate the poverty, and to make integrated quality education a reality. And I believe that with this kind of commitment, we can solve the problem. There can be no gainsaying of the fact that we're in a moment of crisis. Not every crisis has not only its danger points, but it has its opportunities, and it is my great hope that America at the hour will see the opportunities and meet them head on and stand up and make the American dream a reality. Evans. Thank you, Dr. King. Now, Mayor Ivan Allen of Atlanta, Georgia. Allen, I support the position of the President of the United States, as stated last evening, that in a democratic society, law and order must be maintained at all costs. Locally, I will attempt to do this through the protective forces of the city of Atlanta. Lacking the capabilities, I'll have no hesitation to call for the National Guard, or in a rare instance, to ask for, if necessary, for federal troops and intervention. I will not, however, hide behind just a facade of law and order. We must recognize that the deep problems that have created these unlawful acts must be solved. I would propose that in order to solve them, we must mount a massive attack on the slums of America, that we provide the necessary funds over a 3 to 5 year period to build the necessary number of low-income housing units that would eliminate the slums. I would qualify that by saying that incorporating in the program, we should provide for hiring people that are now unemployed in the slums in this building program. The units should be widely dispersed, and we should provide a decent place for people in this country to live on a minimum standard that would make it possible to qualify them for good jobs and to receive the opportunities of education. Evans. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Roy Wilkins, the primary necessity, as I see it, is for us to resurrect a phrase from the report on the Watts riots of 1965. A phrase that unfortunately has been ignored. The commission there is recommended, or the commission there recommended that the problems be attacked with a revolutionary attitude. That meant, if I understand the language, that our approach to the problems of the slums and of the minorities must not be business as usual, must not be routine, must not be bound by tradition, must take into account the cost only in the light of the results to be obtained. If we can spend $20 billion for war, if we can revive a whole continent of Europe, underwrite the economies of Germany, France, Italy, England, and see what these people recover, see that these people recover their equilibrium, then we can underwrite the cost of recovering the equilibrium of our own native black people now. Applause. This is not easy, and it will not yield to impatience or tantrums, or foot tamping, or accusations. But it must yield to a revolutionary attitude in schools, in housing, as Mayor Allen has suggested, and in employment. We have got to recognize that we have 20 million black deprived people here. We have several more millions of white deprived people, poor people, and if the richest nation in the history of the world cannot solve the problem of living for its own people, then we deserve to go down the drain. We won't, of course, because we will solve it. Evans. Thank you, Dr. Wilkins. Now, Dick Gregory, please. Applause. Gregory. I'm going to have to talk very fast because I have to fly out of here shortly to Kansas City, Missouri to help out a friend of mine, a white cat that just moved into an all-colored neighborhood. General laughter. And some colored bigot burned a watermelon on his front lawn. General laughter. You know, when you look at the amount of humor, sometimes this gets very frightening. When you stop and think that I said it and Congress did not pass an anti-rat bill, but they passed an anti-riot bill, which means that our Senate and Congress might be more anti-Negro than anti-rat. I'm sitting here with some gentlemen that I've met in very strange position, Mr. Drew Pearson, who helped me feed people in Mississippi with $150,000 worth of turkeys on Christmas. And I would say, and I say this with qualified authority because I've spent over $300,000 doing research of this problem, and I would say that offset violence in this country 6 months. Dr. Martin Luther King and I met in jail under circumstances, it's under strange circumstances. It's funny, the night we got arrested on Good Friday morning, and when I checked the cell block Easter Sunday, he was gone. General laughter, applause. I had the good fortune of being in Mayor Allen's jails in Atlanta, and I say this in all sincerity, that I'm very thrilled when I heard that they picked Brother Jenkins to serve on the board with you, because out of all the jails I've been in, this was the only jail through this police commissioner there that you didn't feel like fighting when you come out. And I'm glad he's on the board. Applause. Mr. Wilkins here, we met. We were trying to feed some people in Mississippi, and in one day's time, my introduction to him is he helped me sell $16,000 worth of records in one day's time. And I am very nervous sitting here for the first time in my life, because you are sitting here looking at two men that are the most powerful people in this country today, because what they will come up on this commission will decide if America will survive or not. And this is how important this is. Our faith and destiny of this country surviving lies in these two gentlemen's hands. This is how important this commission is, and if they do not do their job, this country is in trouble. I listened to the president's speech last night. I felt that we should have had a Negro co-chairman, because I know that's going on out there, and I know how that Negro brother feels. We have Roy Wilkins sitting here, who has one of the most brilliant minds, one of the most ethical, moral men in the world. Mayor Allen, to me, is not a politician. He's a statesman. I feel we should have had applause. I feel we should have had a militant Negro on there, whether you like it or not, because we're fighting for survival now. I also feel that we have too many politicians on there, that we're in a time of crisis, and I don't say this to belittle, and we need more statesmen. Statesmen flex their minds, and politicians flex their muscles. And I feel that we should have had more psychiatrists, more philosophers, more sociologists, because we are in trouble in this country. Believe me. Applause. And in summing up what I want to say, that the first thing this commission should do, the first thing is to get a national document signed by the president to apologize for the South, that we in this country blame the South for this filthy race problem for 100 years, and now the whole world knows it was America's problem. And as the South was blamed wrongly, they reacted by lynchings and bombing. The Negro have been blamed wrongly. We've been blamed for all of the ignorance, all of the wrongdoings, and we're acting just like the Southerner. We're tearing up buildings and doing everything. Follow the parallel, please. The South needs to be apologized to, because this is a national problem, and I hope you'll see to it that they will do that. If we treat this problem the way we treat a slum building that burns down, when the fire commissioner shows up, the first thing he says, we're going to check into it and see what caused it. If we check into these explosions and see what caused them, instead of talking about looters and hoodlums, check and find out what caused it. Because you're aware of a theory called spontaneous combustion. When you put dirty, oily, greasy rags in a closet, when you close the door so air can't circulate, nature's going to take care of the rest. You can call those rags ignorant. You can call them nigger. You can call them fool. If you don't have enough wisdom to open up that door, it's spontaneous combustion. The black ghettos in America today is America's oily, dirty, greasy rags. And Evans, I think we'll have to call a halt there. Thanks very much, Dick Gregory. Applause. We'll have plenty of opportunity as the program progresses. We hope that the audience will participate later in this program, as we're going to ask them to do, and we hope that they will be abrasive with their questions, because I think that's the best way to get information from these talented people. From the convention of the International Platform Association, met in a convention here in Washington, D.C. at the Sheridan Park Hotel, we have a distinguished panel from whom you've already heard in their summation statements. I'd like very much to throw this question out for you. I find that you agree more than you disagree, and I would like to ask this question. Inasmuch as you have placed much of the blame on poverty in the nation, and I'd like to quote a man, I haven't got permission from the copyright owners, but he's within my arm's length here, and I'm going to ask a question which he proposed in a column recently, where he said, no one thought it could have happened in America because we are directing our thoughts to what caused the race riots. But it did happen in a city completely integrated, in a city where Negroes had lucrative jobs in the auto plants, the only city in the United States sending 2 Negroes to Congress. In Detroit, Negroes and whites for many years have lived side by side. Most of them owned their own homes. Walter Reuther years ago had welcomed Negroes into the United Auto Workers, making it one of the most completely integrated unions in the nation. The state of Michigan is the leader in the civil rights movement as far as legislation is concerned. So the question now comes up. Why the riots? Here it seems a city has taken the lead in the model city situation. Poverty programs, name it, would you take to answer that, any one of you? Gregory, I think the riots are, again, we just can't say why in one city. I think Abraham Lincoln told us in 1857 when he made a speech and said, when you have succeeded in dehumanizing the Negro, you have put him down and placed him where the ray of hope is blown out, as in the darkness of the damned. And when you have extinguished his soul in his world and placed him where the ray of hope is blown out, are you quite sure the demon you have aroused will not turn and rend you? We was warned in 12 Evans. Well, my question is, the arguments that you have used as a reason for the race riots seemingly were on their way to being taken care of, or had been taken care of in Detroit. And yet has been probably the worst example of a riot in our American history. Gregory, well, when we say Evans, Dr. King, well, I was about to say I would question whether the problem has been taken care of in Detroit in a thorough, massive sense. Now, certainly Detroit has made some significant progress, and I would be the first to say that some of the conditions that I've seen in some other cities are not as great or as intensified or in as intensified form as in Detroit. But I think we would have to admit that Detroit has the same problems that we would find in other cities. In other words, there is still a great gulf between Negro income and white income. That's true in Detroit. It's true in all of our major cities. The unemployment rate as I said, is twice as high. Now, that's true in Detroit. I don't know the figures on it, but it's about the same as we find across the nation. Negroes are twice. There are more Negroes unemployed than whites. Now, these conditions, even though the Gulf may not be as wide in Detroit as in some other cities, the Gulf is there. Evans, why should the violence be so much greater than in a city that's made more progress than any other? King, well, this is always one of the facts of history we must face. Progress whets the appetite for greater progress, and the nearer you get to the goal, often the more determined you are to get there. And I think we must recognize this as a sociological fact, that often progress itself whets the appetite for greater progress. And if it isn't fast enough, then the despair sets in, and this can lead to a kind of violence that we've seen there. Evans, may I ask this question? Anybody else want to handle that? Dr. Wilkins. I think that's what this commission was appointed to find out. Why it happened in Detroit. And I'd rather display my ignorance before a smaller audience than a large one. Laughter, applause. Evans, because this year has been such a dramatic year, and because it was predicted to be such a dramatic year, is there, in your opinion, any outside influence that has whetted this? Wilkins, I think on that question, I, for one, will have to accept the judgment of the Attorney General of the United States. He has more investigators than I have and has a bigger payroll than I have, and he has access to more information than I have. And he says there is no evidence of a conspiracy, so that it seems to me we have to proceed on the assumption that the causes lie within the cities themselves, and that nobody from outside came in. Nobody underwrote it. Nobody conspired to do it. Now, if the Attorney General isn't telling us the truth, then we'll find that out sooner or later, and then we can decide what to do about the Attorney General. Evans, Mayor Allen, I do not think that these are outside forces, except within the United States itself. I do not think that they're communistic inspired, or that there's a plot on the part of Russia to create a revolution in this country. I don't think so at all. From the limited experience that I have seen in minor incidents in the city of Atlanta, they usually come about from some act of provocation when there's a difference of opinion between someone who's probably had a little too much to drink and a police officer who may not handle the thing judiciously all the way through, And then with a few of the normal agitators that have come out of SNCC, they can build these things up into a fire, and this apparently got started in Detroit. Perhaps certain forces did not move rapidly enough. Perhaps it was not met strongly enough. But by the time it builds up and gets going, why, then it takes massive forces. I do not feel that these are outside influences that have come into America to create these situations. Evans, do you find any significance in the fact that one of the most militant has now shown up at Castro's right elbow? Or maybe I should say his left elbow. General laughter. Allen, well, he's now gone to Cuba. That's all right. Gregory, well, I think that there is an outside influence, and I think in America we'd better see it. And that outside influence is the Declaration of Independence, which says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. And when these rights are destroyed over long periods of time, it is your duty to destroy or abolish that government. And if people follow it to the letter, then that would be the influence. Evans, are you satisfied with this question? Do you have any comment on Mr. Carmichael's action in connection with the previous question? Dr. Wilkins, Mr. Wilkins? Wilkins, no. Evans, Mr. King? King, no. Evans, may I ask this further question? It's interesting to me, and Dick Gregory may have answered it. It's interesting to me that the violence in the North has been far in excess to the violence in the South, and yet we have always been told that the Southerner has been the most antipathetic towards the Negro. To what do you attribute this, Mayor Allen? Allen, I think that basically there are two causes for that. Perhaps one is that there's more of an inhibitory respect or force of the police department in the South. That this is still an inherited quality that comes down through the years. And the second thing is probably the most dissatisfied and the most misused citizens or half-citizens of the rural areas have moved into the East, and this has been more of a transient population. The South has had Negro citizens for years, many of whom have acquired good homes and own them themselves. Atlanta has a major Negro business community. We have a certain stability that perhaps does not exist in the East in these ghettos that have developed over the past 20 years. Evans. Any further comments, Dr. King? King. Yes, I think there is another important point to be added to that, and that is in the realm of explaining the legislative and judicial advances that we've seen over the last few years, from the Supreme Court's decision of 54 right on through to the Civil Rights Bill of 64 and the Voting Rights Bill. Now, these legislative and judicial developments gave a great deal of hope to the Negro, and it is very important, but they did very little to improve conditions for the millions of Negroes in the teeming ghettos of the North. In other words, it did very little to penetrate the lower depths of Negro deprivation. And I think that we must see that the North finds itself in that position now of seeing retrogress and not progress. At least in the South, the Negro can see pockets of progress, but this isn't true of the Negro in the northern ghetto. He sees retrogress in the sense that the masses of Negroes find themselves in a worse economic situation now, and the progress that we've made economically has been mainly on the professional level, middle-class Negroes. So I think we have to see that these things did not apply in the northern ghetto, and this makes for a great deal of despair. I'll go ahead and end this part right there. Let me go ahead and I want to say I apologize for the use of a certain derogatory slur, but as always, I try to present things as they are written out, and unfortunately that was used in that situation. But yeah, you have Wilkins, King, Gregory, and Allen, 4 individuals here in a roundtable discussion being led by Mr. Evans, who are all not just talking about the Johnson administration's formation of a commission to better help figure out things, but what needs to be done in general. I'll put some links in the description below the video. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tries to tell you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, later.